Here we are with one of my most requested videos of all time. Arcade Edition Yun is a bit of a special case among SF4 characters, or perhaps fighting game characters in general, because the developers have confirmed they made him top tier on purpose. Yet it's hard to point to a specific thing about him that's really broken. If I made a video like that, it would probably be a pretty short list, something like this. And this doesn't emphasize the truly broken thing about Yun, which is his versatility. So instead, I'm going to structure this video by listing all of the categories in which Yun was one of the best characters in the game. First, his movement and screen presence. On the surface, Yun's range looks a little stubby. None of his pokes go that far, he's got no projectile, and generally he's got no play until he's next to you. But actually, he's pretty dangerous from almost anywhere on the screen. There's a few reasons for this. First, his dash punch travels extremely quickly, functioning similarly to Kami's spiral arrow. This gives Yun fantastic punishing potential compared to most other short-range characters. It also stacks on well with his long-range cancels, such as stand short, far strong, and low forward. With these normals, Yun can easily pick up punishes from surprisingly far away. They also make fantastic buffered cancels in neutral. Many rushdown characters are pretty weak to zoning or fireballs until they get in. Yun's EX shoulder is similarly fast, with enormous range and fireball invincibility. So if he had a bar, he could shut down most fireball characters completely. Even if he didn't have meter to spend, he could still react at many ranges with medium shoulder. Or even heavy, which is much more rewarding to land. Of course, the main reason his movement was good was the dive kick. Yun's dive kick travels across the screen extremely quickly, and he could threaten it even from a neutral jump. And because of that, the opponent couldn't just DP whenever they saw Yun leave the ground, in case he didn't dive kick. On most knockdowns, Yun could easily use his dive kick to reposition. Things like escaping the corner were trivial, even if the opponent quick rose. Dive kick was also good to threaten fireballs. Yun could dive kick to avoid landing on a fireball from a neutral jump, and if he was close enough, he could even punish the opponent for throwing it. There's one more thing I want to mention for his screen presence, and that's EX Dash Punch. EX Dash Punch is +1 at worst, and it's even more plus the more it's spaced. Because Yun is a 3-frame character, that means for the cost of a bar, he could get point blank and it would be his turn. Basically, he could spend a bar to get a mix-up whenever he wanted. This is 10 times worse than when Urian had +2 EX Tackle on SF5. I'll be bringing up EX Dash Punch in basically every category, because it's unbelievably powerful in so many different ways. But first, I just want to say that even on block, it's a fantastic approach tool for its massive range and for being plus. Actually, one last thing I want to mention here, even though it's not a movement option per se, is his Whiff Palm. Basically, Yun could do palms mid-screen to build meter very quickly. It would also destroy incoming fireballs. Using this, Yun could force the opponent to approach him, so even though it doesn't move, it still helped him close the distance. The next way Yun was one of the best characters in the game were his Blockstrings and pressure. In basically every way that Blockstrings could be good, Yun's were good. First of all, he could easily get a pretty long true Blockstring, and convert it even from max range. He could chain his light normals, so this whole combo only has a single link. He had a very good option select starter in low short, delayed QFC jab. On hit or block, this came out as low short stand jab. A low starting confirm that was +3 on block. This could be converted into a decently high damage combo on hit. But the beauty of this confirm is that if the low short whiffed, the close jab would come out as light dash punch. This gave Yun a reliable punish on the opponent's reversal backdash, which is normally a strong wake-up option in SF4 due to its speed and invincibility. His other confirms were similarly good. Low strong was a 2-frame link into itself, and a 2-frame link into far medium punch, so he could get triple medium confirms. The large reach of his low short also meant that he could do third hit low short on his confirms to punish people who started blocking high. Another nice confirming option he had was his jab short strong TC. This target combo is again a true block string, and on hit, Yun can easily cancel it to an ender. But surprisingly, doing the whole TC is only -2 on block. Even more surprising, only doing the first 2 hits is actually +1 on block. What's especially nice about this TC is that even if you do it from afar, it always ends in Yun's close strong, which is one of his only normals that combos to EX Dash Punch. As I'm sure you guessed, EX Dash Punch itself is fantastic for pressure, since it puts you point blank and plus even on block. If your initial pressure string didn't pan out, just EX Dash Punch and try again. Canceling to EX Dash Punch is rarely a bad idea. As you can see, the corner carry is great too. And you have a few other nice enders for your block strings too. You can end any block string in light shoulder, which combos from all of Yun's mediums. On hit it does decent damage and a whopping 200 stun. And on block it's only -3, and most characters can't punish it. I'll talk more about this later, but cancels to shoulder that hit, function is confirms to his super. Another potential ender was Yun's palm. It's plus on block, very high damage, and has good stun, chip, and meter build. The downside is that it's much too slow to ever combo, and it can even be interrupted. But people trying to interrupt might get hit by light shoulder. Also, Yun could cancel into a palm fake, which could make an excellent reset option. All of these pressure options are strong, but probably not in the realm of broken. But Yun did have one broken pressure option, and that was dive kick loops. In Arcade Edition, Yun could do a dive kick very low to the ground, almost as low as Rufus. Doing the dive kick this low was almost impossible for the opponent to react to. At the end of any plus frame block string, Yun could simply jump, low dive kick, and try again. Plus on block, almost unreactable, completely meterless. What makes this so strong is the opponent had to be pretty committal to punish it. A decent answer was jump back normal after a block string, but 1, that wouldn't even always hit. 2, you had to hold up after blocking a normal, so you could get hit in pre-jump frames. And 3, if it didn't work, you'd surrender a ton of ground. Another answer was crouch teching with an anti-air. Ryu, for example, could do light kick, light punch, and heavy punch together while holding down back. If grabbed, this input would tech a throw. But if Yun dive kicked, this input would give Ryu a crouch fierce, which would anti-air. Lots of characters didn't even have good crouch tech anti-airs. And many of the characters that did would have it on a very slow anti-air, so this wasn't even on the table for most of the cast. Not to mention many anti-air normals are pretty bad on grounded hit. You probably won't be surprised to find out that Yun was one of the best characters in the game at pushing mix-ups. First of all, between his low pushback and his plus on block normals, naturally he had very good frame traps. This was supposed to be counterbalanced by his poor throw range. Except Yun had a command grab with more range than a typical throw. And unlike most command grabs, he could actually combo out of it. This type of command grab is extremely dangerous. People sweat when T-Hawk has a 230 damage command grab, but while this grab does 0 damage, Yun can potentially get a significantly stronger combo out of it if you invest some resources. And unlike T-Hawk, Yun's command grab combos all have fantastic okizeme. Of course, T-Hawk's command grab has 2-frame startup with more range, while Yun's command grab is 7-frame. So Yun's not better outright, but I do want to emphasize that generally speaking, this command grab is more dangerous than a grappler's when it lands. Even worse was Yun's EX command grab, which was 5-frame startup with even more range. And what's more, it was actually invincible to throws. This was an insanely powerful tool in his block strings, and had incredible synergy with his dive kick. Dive kick already punishes stand tech and crouch tech, forcing opponents to block or reversal. While his command grab was one of the best tools in the game at punishing blocking. It was also very common to see a deliberately short dive kick into regular or command throw, so reacting to the jump with blocking wasn't even enough. As I'm sure you can guess, the threat of grab versus hit was extremely potent after a block DX dash punch. But because EX command grab is 5-frame startup, it was impossible for 4-frame characters to do a normal between a block DX dash punch and then instant EX command grab. The normal and grab would connect on the same frame, but when this happens in SF4, the throw wins. And even though every character had a 3-frame option in grab, it didn't matter here since EX command grab is throw invincible. And again, he had these mix-ups after a palm feint too. It's normal for a rushdown character to have good okizeme, but Yun pushed the limits on this too. Almost all his common knockdowns gave Yun extremely good oki. The most common meaty Yun players did was an ambiguous dive kick. Basically, you get right over the opponent's head, then do a dive kick. If you do a short dive kick, it won't cross up. If you do a forward dive kick, it will cross up. Either way, it'll be plus on block because it's meaty. And no matter how this dive kick hits, it leads to a combo. This mix-up was crazy hard to react to, and even if you did react, it instantly layered into more mix-ups. And the icing on the cake is that most reversals would actually whiff against the cross-up dive kick, so reversaling out wasn't even an option for the vast majority of the cast. This could happen even to the really good DPs. The potential side switch was obviously useful for positioning, but it also prevented the opponent from using left-right charge moves, which removed the option to reversal the following block string from characters like Boxer or Dictator. Between all this, it was extremely common for Yun to get a knockdown and then just loop meaty dive kick pressure until he won. Another meaty option that was pretty common was meaty palm. Normally it's only +1 on block, but as a meaty it was much better. On a hit, Yun could get nice combos out of it. And it could be hard to challenge. It put out a huge hitbox with tons of active frames, and it could trade favorably with lots of reversals. And it's not as easy as reversal once you see the reactable start up, since again, Yun could fake it. I remember one meme in particular making the rounds in Arcade Edition era, joking about just how big this invisible hitbox was and how long it lasted. It's also an armor breaker, so you couldn't armored reversal or focus backdash. Basically, a meaty palm was free guaranteed chip on a lot of the cast. One category you might not expect Yun to be one of the game's best characters was his defense. Yet, Yun had some of the game's best defensive options. His EX uppercut had total invincibility and only 4 frame startup. This is fast enough to beat even most safe jumps. Even his regular uppercuts had enough invincibility to reliably beat meaty attacks. This is a stark contrast from the other 3S characters in SF4. The light uppercut in particular had a pretty short whiff, and by the time the invincibility wore off, Yun was airborne, so if he got hit out of it, he was only air reset. On block, the uppercut sideswapped, once again punishing charge characters by removing their charge. And his strong defensive tools didn't stop at his uppercut. He had 2 good 3-frame normals, so he could easily challenge many block strings. His backdash was one of the biggest backdashes in the game. This has its upsides and downsides. I want to say it had the longest duration of all backdashes, which is obviously bad, but I think it also covered the farthest distance and had some of the most invincibility. He could backdash out of things that most other characters couldn't, which helped him avoid chip KOs. EX command grab was frame 1 throw invincible, so he could get huge punishes on throw meaties or throw resets with a good read. His armor break was insanely good. You had armor break on dash punch, which Yun could easily cancel into anytime he saw himself being armored. It would interrupt a release, or chase a backdash. And this is the most out of place, he had a low profile, low short. Basically, the idea with low-profile attacks is they drop the user's hurtbox abnormally low, which allows them to avoid many different kinds of attacks. Yun and Yang both had it on crouching light kick, when almost all other low-profile options were mediums, heavies, or command normals. This meant Yun and Yang had a ridiculously fast zero-commitment low-profile option compared to other characters, which led to some extremely unusual scenarios. Yun also had one of the game's best ultras. Unlike most ultras, Yun's Ultra 1 allowed for juggles afterward. With the juggles, this did about as much damage as most other ultras. However, because less damage was coming from the ultra itself, it was significantly stronger than other ultras if you used it with only half revenge meter. And unlike most other ultras, it did significantly more damage depending on meter investment or screen position. One thing that united most of the characters added for Super was how muted their ultras were. There was no character who could easily land their full connect ultra off of anything the way that Ryu or Rufus could in vanilla. Well, Yun only had a few setups to his Ultra 1, but one in particular was extremely ubiquitous and versatile, EX Dash Punch. This was absolutely insane. First of all, it was a 1-bar setup, compared to many of the cast needing to FADC to land their full connect ultras. And it wasn't even a weak setup, EX Dash Punch is pretty strong. However, the ending juggle state was a bit limited. You only had one hit of EX shoulder, I think. This was still often worth the bar. Second, while EX Dash Punch is admittedly a bit restrictive to combo into, you could still get it off of Yun's most common starters. And let's not forget EX Dash Punch is plus on block, goes full screen, and is in general a great move to just throw out. All this time I've been talking about how good it is on block, but if it hits, you get Ultra. Imagine if Kami's EX Spiral Arrow was plus on block at all ranges, and it led to full connect Ultra on a hit. That's Yun. Yun could also land this Ultra from most any of his other launchers, notably close medium kick or a Palmer EX up kick in the corner. Yun's Ultra 2 was pretty good as well as a Fireball punish, but generally it had no setups, and Yun was already decent versus Fireball characters, so most Yun players picked Ultra 1 in basically all matchups from what I remember. I feel like it's worth mentioning that Yun had one of the game's best supers. People don't discuss supers much in SF4, because generally the meter was better spent on FADCs or EX moves. But while Yun had great EX moves, his super gave them a run for their money. While active, Yun's normals and specials all cancel into each other, and he also had unlimited juggle potential. This let him pick up extremely high damage combos, even considering the massive scaling they inflicted. Yun could easily confirm super after any block string to shoulder, and the damage was pretty nice. And because it had infinite juggle potential, he could also land it off of anti or uppercut. You could even do it after Ultra 1, which led to some insanely powerful sequences. Now, one category I think you probably wouldn't guess a character like Yun would be great is his damage, and this is really what sets Yun apart from most other rushdown characters. Actually, he hits like a freight train. Because your main confirm was a triple medium sequence, Yun was actually decently powerful even meterless. His 1-bar combos were also pretty strong, and they had great corner carry. His focus combos were extremely good because of the way Palm worked. It was normally too slow to combo into, but perfect after a focus. Once more, doing focus backdash on a cornered opponent had the Palm hit meaty, which led to some very strong sequences. But even mid-screen after a backdash, Yun had better conversions than most characters, so his focus was pretty deadly in general. Target combos have a reputation for being weak with high scaling in SF4, and generally that's true, but all of Yon's target combos were extremely powerful to compensate for the scaling. Look at the damage on these TCs. Combine all this with his high damage ultra and versatile super, and you have one of the strongest characters in the game. Again, on a character who already has the best up-close mix-up, the best okizeme, the best pressure, and some of the best defense. Now, did Yon have any weaknesses to justify all these strengths? A few. First of all, he only had 900 health. Though he did have 1000 stun like most other characters. Also, he had no way to FADC his up kicks, so if you wanted to reversal, you had to commit. Which is really horrible for a low HP character, and a significant downside compared to other low health characters like Kemi, Akuma, or Seth. He also had below average grab range, and no real ranged play, which means he has to play up close even against grapplers. All of these things genuinely did hurt him, but nowhere near enough to compensate for his long list of strengths. I'm not going to go crazy talking about his changes in AE 2012 and Ultra, but I'll mention a few of them. From 2012 on, he can no longer combo EX Dash Punch to Ultra 1 unless it connects at the tip, which also means it won't work in his confirms. This already went a long way to making him a more fair character, but also, point blank, EX Dash Punch is now -1 on block. Though what's amusing about this change is that it actually went to -1 in AE 2012, back to +1 in Ultra, and then back to -1 in the Ultra 1.04 patch, so they obviously weren't committed to the nerf. Another huge nerf is that all versions of Command Grab are 3 frames slower, while EX lost throw invincibility. Amusingly, all Command Grabs now do 1 damage instead of 0. Which means combos from Command Grab are no longer unscaled. Other big nerfs include a higher minimum height on his dive kicks, losing low profile low short, and going down to 950 stun. Even with all the downgrades he got between Arcade Edition and now, Yum was absolutely blessed by the system mechanic changes of Ultra. And he still ended up winning Capcom Cup 2015. I think it speaks volumes that he was a top tier even after a nerf list that was several pages long. So why did they make Yun so good? Well, here's a brief history lesson. While SF4's initial release was a breath of fresh air in the fighting game scene, it had a lot of characters who were remembered as being extremely overpowered. In fact, every week I get requests to cover Vanilla Sagat, Seth, Zangief, or Akuma on Bad Balance. About a year afterward, Capcom released Super Street Fighter 4, the game's first balance update, and the balance among the top tier characters seemed to be extremely good, with about 10 characters all approximately showing high tier status, without any clear top tiers besides maybe Honda or Akemi. Capcom was apparently extremely happy with Super's balance, and in fact, developers repeatedly said it would be the final version of the game, and they'd never take Street Fighter 4 to a Hyper or Ultra version. Well, we all know how that turned out, and Super ended up being the second edition of 5. Well, initially, Super Street Fighter 4 was a console-exclusive game, and since the FGC was largely arcade-based in Japan, there were plans eventually to bring it to arcades. To sweeten the deal and build hype for the arcade version of Super, it had another rebalance as well as 4 new characters, Yun, Yang, Evil Ryu, and Oni. The developers have confirmed in interviews that the new characters, or at least Yun and Yang, were top tier by design. Apparently, they thought having deliberately overpowered characters would foster competitive spirit and accommodate people who liked playing or liked fighting such characters. The thought was that the people who didn't like the arcade balance could just play the console version, since there were originally no plans to bring the arcade edition to consoles. Additionally, it was seen as a little insurance for Capcom that fans would eventually demand for another rebalance further down the line. Well, appropriately, for the year arcade edition was played, Yang, and even more so Yun, absolutely dominated the competitive scene. Yun is usually regarded as the somewhat stronger of the two, but I could absolutely make a Bad Balance video on Yang sometime down the line. For the record, even with everything I've shown, Yun is probably still not as good as Vanilla Sagat, so I might cover him next time.